All right, we are live again for another weekly Q&A with Austin, our host of The Art of Profitable Event Production. I love how this weekly series is really starting to get us moving and still building momentum, especially in this time of need. And today's topic especially has me super excited because I'm a true believer in partnerships and collaboration. And I'm really glad that we were able to bring that to light. So please, Austin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And let's get started.
Well, so partnerships are really important to everybody, especially as you have a leaner team than ever. And there are a lot of considerations about the current market conditions that would lead you to look forward to monetizing different channels of work that are related, but not necessarily integrated with your current business model and capabilities, right? So there's a really hot topic because you're able to cover more ground, basically, by partnering in any capacity. But of course, everyone's mind and soul goes to the scary, dark place of protection and all the caveats of partnership that can be very unsettling, from partners behaving in their own certain ways and running their businesses, let's say, different than your own. So right now, more than ever, it's just so important that we consider that. And it's interesting too, and I want to go back, is that our company, and I hate talking about our company, on these shows, but it's kind of relatable. Is that I started out as a very specific niche, and we ended up growing into these other things. And now we do the tech services. We also do the fabrication and the printing, as well as the design management and production in-house with people under my roof, with equipment under my roof that does that. That's all good. But I'll tell you, we didn't arrive at that very quickly because I didn't get funding for this business. I don't have business partners. And I'm sure that a lot of you face the same thing. And for me in year 12, it's a little bit easier for me to talk about it because it was kind of in the rearview mirror. But when I was starting out, the whole way that we scaled the business entirely was by using vendors to do the things that we eventually brought under, in-house. So we eventually hired somebody full-time to do a duty that an outsourced vendor would do, right? So whether it's you as a planner looking to increase volume, which is basically how many events can you do? One of our first points in the video is talking about why would you consider partnership? And probably if you're tuning in right now, you already considered it and you know the benefits, but let's just talk about it. Increasing volume. So if you have 2 events on the same date, or even programs that lap in the same month, where you have to be on site so much that it really prevents you from responding and being responsive to those clients that are overlapping in the same month. By having a secondary partner in the planning spectrum, you can basically double yourself. You can duplicate yourself and take on more work. Even if you have that the sister agency or that other planner becomes your junior, that's always a good way to kind of make sure that conduit to you is always being responded to quickly, and you guys can cover all the earth that you need to. Then when you get on site, you can become the primary point of contact for your client, but they now have 2 points of contact within your company. So you can cover more ground and make more revenue pretty obviously there, right? Separately, you can also take larger projects. So if you have a conference that spans every ballroom in the whatever convention center or hotel, that's a lot for a single planner, or a planner that has 5 coordinators, or even 2 planners and 7 coordinators, right? If you can divide and conquer, where one person is just general session, I kind of like that. So you like to separate, or at least we like to separate based on geography. So you handle general session, I'll handle everything else. Or you can cover it based off of, vertical. So I've had a lot of people that will contact a planner that knows hospitality very well, came from a hotel background. And all they will do is hotel relations, right? So it's meals, breaks, setups, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. Mahoganey, do you have an opinion about dividing larger projects with that partner? Do you like to divide it based off of space, physical coverage, or do you like to divide it based off of specialty?
I like to do it based on specialty. So especially because we have those planners who are exceptional at what I would call like the concierge type service. So the ones who can really be the face and the customer service to the attendees and to the speakers, like that meet and greet person. I love having the F&B person. I do enjoy also having the production person. Like when everyone is able to own a segment, you're able to thrive. I know for me, I always preferred to be on the production side and the run of show and that type of thing. So I always like to find somebody who complements kind of what I do and has that eye for making sure the food and beverage is set up properly, making sure that everything is running as it should be, understanding content planning. I know Deshaun also a member of the group. She's phenomenal when it comes to content and understanding when things have shifted in a program too, which you don't always see, especially on site, to be able to give heads up to speakers and things like that. So I like being able to parcel out the different portions.
You're absolutely right with that, and I agree with that. I think it's more important to do that than geography, because my opinion about geography is really, unless you have a very basic conference where you're not spending a lot of money on audiovisual or food and beverage, the geography thing I think can kind of run flat pretty fast, unless it's a trade show. I feel like in the trade show environment, where you're really load in is more intense than really your live days for the most part, geography might be most important from like a convention center model. But truthfully, I think that you're right, because there are so many amazing F&B people who really understand how much time it takes to set a room, and they can audit that to make sure that you're staying on schedule, as well as the tech services position where you make sure that all your speakers are wrangled and the proper microphones are on the person. Those are the moments where conferences fall apart fast or events fall apart fast. And having an expert in those fields is really important, because you can kind of make sure that you have all the jockeys riding the best horse for their management style and specialty. So that's really important. And that brings me to a really organic segue to the third point of why to entertain strategic partnerships, and that is additional skill sets, right? So some of these partners don't have to be a planner, how we were just talking about Mahoganey. They can actually be a full service company, because you can bring in an audiovisual partner, and that audiovisual partner probably has a stage manager that works for them full time. So you're basically using the audiovisual partner to become part of your team at that point. So with high tech, celebrity or influencer, I know that when we have talent attended things, we like a talent wrangler who can handle all the green room drama, because that will bog you down, and that just never goes well. So having that division where you're not bothered by, I know this one time we were managing, I shouldn't say the name for professional reasons, but a hip hop, and we had to go get this edible frozen algae that was $600 for this algae for him to eat on breaks. And it was like bizarre stuff like that. And you know how much time and how much stress it would have been if I had to deal with buying big Grammy Award winning artist algae, but I have had to do it. So, so that's a niche example, but it happens, right?
And some people are exceptional at that. I mean, bring in those who are good at it. I mean, if you think about it from a production standpoint, and really, I want to say protecting your brand and your integrity of the production.
Right.
Put the right people on it. I mean, I know sometimes we often get afraid of, and I know we'll talk about this a little later too, in what a true partnership looks like. But I love that you're actually adding that it can be somebody outside of our vertical. Because if I look at music, for example, I mean, I'm not a festival producer. I'm not a music producer. So to have somebody who can completely understand the flow of music from start to finish, artist management, production management, and all of those things, it makes a huge difference when that is the end goal or the goal of the client event you're producing. So
you're absolutely right with that one. And an interesting example of that, which we get approached a lot, is that we specialize in experiential. And again, I'm sorry, I hate episodes and people that plug their own stuff, but it's an easy example, is that we focus on experiential. So it's brand centric features that we push out to the world, right? Well, a lot of planners have access to that. So let's say that I've used this example before because it's hypothetical and not realistic, is IBM. If you manage IBM's conferences, and IBM, somebody comes to you and says, hey, we keep hearing about experiential marketing, I would advise that you don't start ideating and don't start designing, because if you partner with an experiential house that can really monetize that relationship to the maximum value, you're probably going to have a happier client, a better relationship, and you probably make more money, oddly enough. Because if I know that the average ball pit or Instagram swing goes for $20,000 and you want to underbid it at $8,000, you might be leaving money on the table, and the client is open to spending more money. Or the ideation that you have is based on Pinterest, whereas when all we do day in, day out is experiential, you might have access to a greater spend, and the client really feels taken care of. So again, it's very scary to pursue partnerships, but I advise that you do, because sometimes you'll leave money on the table when your tech services partner, I mean, let's go back 1 year before we even knew about COVID. I got tech partners that were saying, hey, we can also data stream this, so there's live feeds of it in your Instagram Live. And a lot of clients were like, we don't need that. But now if you look back and people were like saying, oh, you're stupid, no one wants that. People kicking themselves now for not making their conferences digital last year, because this year would have been just an adapted trend audience. They're just doing what they did last year, except for they now have to versus they had the option to last time. So high technology, very scary. When it's optional, it's thought of differently than when it's mandatory. And now it being mandatory, everyone's like pivot, pivot, pivot. But that's just because you're required to. And it's always bad to make decisions when you have to make that decision. Like when you're desperately searching and Googling for partners because a client says, I need a florist in this market tomorrow, you're never going to find the best florist, right? That's a very basic example. But so it's always good to use this downtime of COVID to really vet and look at partners. Even if you don't know if you have a need for them now,
it's true.
Find some. If you guys want to talk to me because you think that we might be a partner for you, go reach out, because right now we're making coffee dates for clients right now because we have the time to meet with new people, explore new ideas. And that makes now being a really good time to have this conversation of partnership. Even if you're a huge company, small agency, or yourself in an apartment, find partners, because you're going to sell more stuff together than going on your own. Mahoganey, any feelings? We're just scratching the surface here, but we had a lot of thought about that.
I know we're just getting started, but you're speaking my language, especially when it comes to hybrid. I mean, that was where I sat and still sit as a producer. And the amount of times that I would get looked at like, oh, well, we don't really need to think about post-production, or, well, we'll record content and we'll see down the road if we actually need to use that content. But like you're saying, just think if we had to put those strategies in place last year. I feel like I've been preaching for years to start small and to start to leverage the digital for your event in producing a hybrid, that now all of a sudden that they're going 100% virtual, the panic.
Right. I mean, obviously we don't have the ability to really look and connect with all of our audience here, Mahoganey, but I wonder how much of our audience has really had to shove themselves into the learning mindset of learning how to virtually pivot or do a hybrid pivot on their events. And unfortunately, that's the worst time to learn. You know, cramming for a test doesn't mean you retain the knowledge nearly as much. And I feel like that's what we're doing right now with the education surrounding virtual events. So we want to talk about the broader picture in the future of our industry. That's why I don't want to talk about COVID, because there is a life beyond COVID. I promise you all that. And that's what we're focusing on, is longevity strategies that don't just affect the now. Obviously now is relevant, so we're talking about it, but we want to talk to you guys about the F&B that you'll be serving in a crowded ballroom once again soon. So that's important here too.
And the opportunity to be strategic in these partnerships that are continuing to scale. I mean, nobody is saying go out and learn every new technology platform and opportunity. Right. Why not look at who you can partner with, who can bring those elements of expertise to your business to help you scale and grow? Exactly. So this is kind of what I like to do, as you guys have seen. I like to, play both sides of the fence here, but like, wouldn't you just be selling services that divert from your core business? And my answer to that, and this is also pacing the video and what we talked about next, was no. I mean, realistically, no. Unless it's really entry-level stuff, you want to be really careful about overselling yourself as something that you're not, right? So I really think that those partnerships, again, are going to be really important to you, but also in the short-term monetization, because everybody here started their own company. Unfortunately, like 90% of them started their own companies to make more money, right? So let's talk about that. So there's a lateral commission agreement that I think you should all put in place and have written before you reach out to these partners. And there's a couple different pieces. And a lot of times people just say, I want a chunk of whatever we work on together. It's easiest with rental companies. You rent a bunch of tables and chairs, the rental companies will give you 10% off industry discount, or they'll cut you a check for 10%. That's common practice here in the West Coast of the United States. I don't know how global that is, but let's just assume that people make commissions off of partnerships that they bring into those client relationships. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that you guys consider those monetization strategies. But I will advise that you should be transparent with your client about how you're operating those partnerships, right? Because I found myself in a lot of PR hot water by not being forthcoming with that. And I think that's a very early lesson to learn. And it's a very easy lesson to fall into, especially right now where you're trying to squeeze, lemonade from, dry lemons. Everyone's trying to squeeze everything. So be careful with that. But I like to put in two agreements. One is the lazy commission. The lazy commission is when I introduce somebody to a partner and I just let them have that. And a lot of times I do it with friends or competing companies that just need help. It's like, here's my guy that does so-and-so. And if I want to monetize that, then I basically say that we get a percentage of the first 5 jobs that they do with that person, because I got to vouch for them. It's my relationship. I made the intro, whatever. You can monetize that.
Separately, you can monetize things that you partner on. So when I partner with an AR or VR development company, we usually will say, 10% of whatever, you do, we expect to get a check back or what have you. Or if we bill that under our banner of services, so when you receive an invoice from our company and you see that we had AR, VR, catering, floral, I'm not the caterer, I'm not the florist. I've hired a brand ambassador company to staff it, whatever it might be, right? We do not mark up the line items because we charge an agency fee. 20% bottom line, that's not necessarily consistent for all agencies, not necessarily even ours, but that bottom line, because I like to tell my clients, look, I'm going to manage everything. I'm going to play bank. I'm going to be legally exposed to all this stuff, insurance exposed to all this stuff. So I expect to make 20% on it to manage it for you. And I'm going to design it and zhuzh it and touch it, right? That's a lot of hand-holding for both between you and the client and then you and those vendors too. So that, in my opinion, is worth a percentage. So I like that thing where the client, if I pay the vendor $100, the client pays me $100, but then I get them for 20% on the bottom line so they can see where I'm making my money. And if there's ever an audit, and I'll tell you, almost every Fortune 500 company puts this in their contracts that you have to survive an audit and all sub-vendors must be one-to-one. You put the paper invoice next to what you billed them and it has to be one-for-one, or else sometimes you can get blocked out. I know this is true of big tech, from Microsoft to broadcasts like Viacom, CBS, Disney, all those guys. They expect a one-to-one on sub-vendors, as well as if you mislead about sub-vendors, you set yourself up for a PR nightmare if they fail, right?
Exactly.
If a vendor comes in short, you shouldn't do this. This is the button that you should put far out of range, but you only hit it at desperate moments. If the, caca hits the fan, you can hit that button and say, that's a vendor, not me. And I really suggest not doing that, because if you hire a vendor, you can name that too, and that's the trust element is so key. But you can then, they basically know up front where your in-house services start and stop, and they know where you extend to. We tell our clients all the time, we say, we can staff it, we can hire a caterer, we can hire a florist, but truthfully, we're not offended if you don't like our florist or our caterer. You can use your own.
Absolutely.
We're happy to manage your own for you. No big deal. But we like to be very transparent about where the start and stop lines are of our business, and then we can put that under our banner of work. So, Mahogany, do you have any comments on that? I know it's a chunky piece of advice.
I love that start and stop, though, line of your business. Because I know even when I first started back in 2004, one of my business mentors at the time had actually mentioned that. So because I was also doing weddings and also corporate events, it was a crazy model. But
weird time.
But I feel like we all start somewhere. And I started
there too. I totally get it.
And I loved weddings. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've said this 17,000 times. I wanted to be the Canadian Preston Bailey, but so of course I took on a lot. I took on weddings, but it was one of my mentors who actually said to remember to do that, to actually add those items to your invoice, and then 20%. I mean, at the time I think it was 27%.
Sure.
With what she had recommended as industry standard, but it's a model that I've stuck to. My later mentors have added and also encouraged us to add things like the aggravation quotient, which I still think to this day is the funniest thing I've ever heard, but still protects you in overall planning and in those partnerships that you bring together, so that it protects you and then it also protects the management and the time that goes into it.
Absolutely. No, you're right. You're absolutely right there. And so we talked about in the video, and also related to this point, is we're just jumping off of the agency service model. So we are an agency, so we bill like an agency, and that is called an agent of service or an agency model. So again, bill actuals, charge a percentage. That's the agency model. Separately, we have the white label model. The white label model we also perform, and we perform it for a couple of reasons. In fact, we're a fabrication house, and everyone knows that people do this, but we never tell our clients when we do. When we get too busy and our shop's too busy and I can't only run people for 6 or 7 days a week on 12 hours a day, we call other fabrication houses that are competitors of ours to take on the extra work. We say, here's a few fixtures that we can easily and modularly have you do, and then plug it into our work. Nobody ever knows that vendor existed. If that vendor fails, it happens in our shop, because all the action is here in the shop before we get to the site to even load in the show, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not going on site, but those are sub vendors that are supporting us to get our work done, right? So that would be more of a turnkey or white label relationship. And then you make up your markup, right? So if I was charging $10,000 for a fixture, I hope that I spent less than $10,000 on it to get it here. The client doesn't know any better, and that's not really a problem. I don't really feel bad about that. If you're doing gift bags, if you're doing collateral, like you're stacking collateral, holy cow, guys, like call a bunch of people or a sorority nearby and just have them make a little garage-based assembly shop for you, because that's not something that your client ever cares about you outsourcing, and that's not something you should ever do yourself alone, right? So white label that puppy. And I just want to mention one thing that we did not talk about in the video that's a very relevant other segment. And I don't know how I didn't even catch this in my own outline, so I apologize, viewers, for failing on that, but you absolutely, positively must collect insurance and name yourself as additionally insured from every single vendor, especially if they go on site. Audiovisual, especially rental companies, because your insurance company, if an accident happens, will drop you. And that hotel will sue you, and you will go down because it is your name on that project. You want every vendor you work with to additionally insure and loss payee you and your business and the officers of your company, as well as if you're going to have that vendor show up with a truck on site, or even a person or a piece of equipment on site, even if it's just a measuring tape, I don't care. Get them to additionally insure the property, the hotel, their owners, all of it, because you'll find yourself in some hot water. And a lot of people don't do this. It's common practice to see about 90% of planners do not grab that insurance from their sub vendors. And that sub vendor better cover your hiney, because you're gonna be in really hot water with that when somebody falls off a ladder and you don't have work comp. Why don't you have work comp, workers' compensation insurance? Is because you don't have employees. Well, maybe that's untrue when their guy fell off a ladder and their workers' compensation does not cover you, does not cover the hotel. And that's when you find yourself in a really fun and very long lawsuit. So I don't mean to scare you guys. It's very easy to ask for it up front, and nobody will push back on you for asking for it. But very rarely will a vendor offer to additionally insure you unless you ask, because it exposes them to additional risk and liability.
Absolutely.
That alone is worth an hour of your time. Truthfully, that advice right there could save you millions of dollars, so be really careful with that. So besides that exposure,
came up in our masterclass about 2 months ago. So we had Heather Reed on, who's a contract expert, who did reiterate that exact point to really drill that home to protect ourselves as planners.
And it's so easy.
Everyone is protecting themselves. We are not doing a great job at that.
You're exactly right. And I pretty much bet that everybody here has probably received a sample certificate. And I apologize, Mahogany. Does it have like it's called Accord on it? Does it have the insurance language? Is it the same in Canada or no? Is it different?
I feel like we do.
Okay. So
Not
basically,
but ours, we definitely still have the same.
Very good. So always create some sample certificate. Hotels usually have it, and identify and outline the minimum general liability stuff that you have. And basically take your own cert, just block out your name and say that that's what you expect from your vendors. And at least you'll cover your butt more than not doing it. Even if you do this part wrong because you don't know what you're doing, just asking for it covers your butt more than you had before we learned this, right? So just do something about it today, and then dive in with an attorney or even with your insurance broker. Your insurance broker will love to explain this to you. They'll be so excited to talk to you about this, because all it does is mitigate risk for them and you. So don't worry about calling your insurance broker who's selling you insurance, and just ask them what you should collect. And I even say, can you just make me a sample certificate so I can give that to all my vendors so they cover our butts? And they will absolutely dive on that opportunity to cover you, okay? So,
I actually never thought of that from that perspective. We do it a lot from the trade show side.
Right.
I feel like we're very good at protecting ourselves, vendors, venue, all of the above when we're producing trade shows, but not as well for all events. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but that's a great reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just a critical piece that you must know. So now we get into the stickier part. You get into the stolen clients and projects talk, because everyone's all worried about create a partnership. We know we're aligned. You're the tech guy. I'm the producer person. We're 50-50 basically, because the conference only has those monetizable elements. Everything else in their attendee structure is based on the organization. So, and the hotel, they maybe contracted themselves. So they've hired you to deliver it, and they want you to also manage the audiovisual, right? Audiovisual guy, coordinates with their staff. Everyone's getting along. You're having client drinks. And you realize everyone's chumming it up. And then all of a sudden in 6 months, you realize that the audiovisual partner branched off on their own and is now working with them directly. That's not ideal. But I'll tell you, a partnership is no different in that respect of hiring your first trusted employees and then defecting. I've heard a lot more horror stories about people founding a company, hiring people, and then their people defect and then take the top tier clients. So you're not mitigating risk by hiring vendors versus hiring staff. And unless you plan on not growing, this is inevitable. So I'm saying that with cautionary measures in place, let's proceed with stop freaking out, stop grilling people. People are going to screw you over, and that's going to be a feeling that is terrible and I never get used to. But you have to trust it to a certain degree, else you're never going to move forward. And there's too much stuff to do in this job to dwell on it. So please, cautiously, but proceed. A vendor and an employee offers you no more protection and no more trust and covenants as long as you have the contracts and legal stuff in place to protect you. So first and foremost, the obvious one, or I think it's obvious, is to have an NDA. Yeah. Almost any NDA is downloadable. It will work because the blanket terms of an NDA are exactly why I think an NDA is pretty weak. NDAs will protect the release of confidential information. You show me a thing and it's blue, I can't tell anybody it's blue, right? It doesn't protect the ability for somebody else to have been shown the same thing and notice it's blue. It just protects the information that's being disclosed between two parties, right? So an NDA is a good start, but NDAs to protect and defend cost a lot of money. So realistically, if I tell Mahoganey a secret, we signed an NDA and she goes and tells somebody else, how do I prove that she told somebody else? I mean, protecting that's very difficult. Most of your attorneys that you're going to find that will actually defend that and possibly have a chance at winning are going to cost 50 grand to actually have action with. So realistically, an NDA is a great thing to just have as a collectible in your files, and that's about all it does, right? Unless you're one of the developing people that's working with code or trade secrets or IP, intellectual property, IP, NDAs are kind of lame. So the important chunks of this are non-competes, non-competition agreements, non-circumvention agreements, which are basically people that circumvent you or solicit, non-solicitation, non-circumvention. Those are kind of paired up. Again, I want to pause here and say that I am not an attorney. You should consult your attorney. Laws change by state, country, region, and even mood of judge. So make sure that you consult an actual attorney before pursuing any of this. This is not legal advice. This is my opinion. Based on my experience only. So non-circumvention, non-solicitation. And then I like to get subjectively weird with it. And I have a code of conduct. We have decorum, right? We have a decorum agreement. And I don't want my guys getting hammered with my client until 2 a.m. and going to inappropriate venues after hours with my clients. I don't want them, having shop talk while in the lobby of the hotel. And that happens a lot with specific partners. I don't want to call out audiovisual companies. I am an audiovisual company, so I can tell you that some of my guys can get a little off the cuff at certain hours and certain beers in. Decorum agreements, those are important to me because the subjective outlook on what you look like was a package of professionalism, is a beacon of your company's shining light, is a 24/7 job when you're on a retreat, or if you're in New York with a client and you're not from New York and you're all trapped in the same hotel. That scares the heck out of me when my crew is at the same hotel as my client. That always scares me. I mean, just God forbid, right? And then the last one is a subjective summation of all of this. It packages the whole thing together. It's called an MVA. It's a master vendor agreement. And that's what we do as a guiding principle for how we run our business. It includes an NDA, insurance certifications. It includes a non-compete, non-circumvention, non-solicitation, code of conduct and decorum, and it even includes quality and delivery and follow-through clause. That section is about a half-page long, and it basically says that our vendors are to operate at a top tier, and if we have a rendering and the reality that doesn't align itself, or if we are quoted a certain thing, if we subjectively think that the quality of the show, or if they missed 19 cues in the production of the thing, or if we had feedback 12 times in the general session, we can subjectively argue the final bill. And some people redline stuff out of our contract. But you know what? Just like the insurance thing I said for you guys to ask for no matter what, ask for it. Try to get a signature. And oddly enough, half the time I get no red lines, no revisions. I get a big old signature on that contract, and I get all 9 pages of my 8-point size, single-spaced Arial font 9-page document, I get a full signature on that puppy. And that puts me in a real good spot. Now, enforcing that is something that we don't like to do, but you can always use that as leverage when something goes bad too. You can say, look, we're not going to get attorneys involved, but you did violate this area. We're obviously not the right fit. We need to talk about this final bill, or I got to bring it down by 10% because it just wasn't up to the quality standards, right? Or when your guy was talking like a sailor and he was down in the lobby with my baby food client, and she's, you know, highly religious and very offended by that commentary. Like, I didn't feel like that was right. You know, it's very hard to hold them to that standard when it's all based on a billable line itemable scope of work, because the audiovisual service could have been perfect, but that one guy was just a jerk, right? But having that decorum standard just sets a tone that there's a professional operation and this is how we're going to engage in business, right? So that was chunky, but I feel very passionately about it because it's happened to me a lot. Mahogany, what do you think about that?
You know what? To be completely fair, I would actually take more comfort and trust in knowing that someone I'm interested in going into a partnership has also done their due diligence on the other side. I mean, I can only speak for the partnerships that I have done formally. I mean, I have one that went completely AWOL about 10 years ago. I mean, we won't speak about that one. We actually tell everyone it's a bad word to bring up.
Yeah.
But I also have another partner that I work with a lot, one of my business besties, and it was hugely comforting to me to know that she also added her own clauses to the same agreement that we were working on, so that we were both protected and we were both equally comforted in knowing that our information can be shared. We're going to solicit each other's clients. If the client, we also added too, that if the client does contact one of us, that we are to let the other know to see if we are going to work kind of behind the scenes or not.
Right.
And we added all of that into it.
Within 48 hours, right? Because there's always those things. You got to include things for expectations. When the expectations are set up front, it's hard to be offended unless you're up to some shady stuff, right? Exactly. People are rarely offended as long as you lead with that. If you try to enforce that later, that's kind of rude of you and unprofessional. You can't have an afterthought. Like, you can't wait till somebody falls off the ladder to pull an insurance cert. And that's happened to me before in situations. And I'm like, whoa, like there was an accident on a job site, a very big job site about a year ago. And it wasn't our accident and it wasn't our fault and we weren't involved. But my guys ran toward the accident and assisted with people coming out of the accident, okay? And then all of a sudden I get all these requests for insurance certs. And I said, whoa, not my circus, not my monkeys, but my guys that got involved. Mahogany?
And that's human nature. I was like, in backup, because all I was thinking was the guys running into it. I'm like, oh no.
I know, and everyone meant well. And it all got resolved fine because the client did acknowledge that my guys were helpful in that. And it was actually a construction defect of the venue itself was what failed on the whole thing. So everyone was protected. But pulling insurance certs after the fact is really, really it's a heinously bad idea. It makes you look incredibly bad to do that, and it's that afterthought will land you in court. So
and it's too late at that point.
It's too late. So
you went in unprepared.
Absolutely. So let's kind of go, on the prospecting phase of not throwing contracts at people, because that can be kind of viewed as relatively aggressive. And Dahlia had a really good question to me, which we did actually omit for time because it took about 8 minutes of our video. We want to keep the videos nice and short and get you guys the most information. But one thing that we also were talking about were idea stealers and idea and strategy stealers, which are terrible people, and they everywhere in every organization. Even when your client isn't doing it, maybe they've told themselves that, or their team or their manager has told them that they're not, but really they're just grabbing ideas and not maybe compensating you for them. Hey, we're going to do this in-house. Hey, we're going with just an audiovisual partner. We're going to coordinate it ourselves, but they still used your stage design, or maybe they use your strategy altogether. And so I want to tell you guys about a little thing that we call an LOI. It's a letter of intent. If you're a creative agency, you might know this as a design retainer. If you come from an architectural background, a design retainer is very, very, very common practice in architectural, interior design, and really creative positions all around, including graphic designers, logo designers, that kind of thing. And I'll tell you, you're not going to have a lot of people that will argue with an LOI unless they're up to some funny business or they don't have true intentions. So it's called a letter of intent. I intend to perform business with one Mahogany, right? And therefore, I will put that in writing that I intend to do business with you. Now, Mahogany, you're gonna design me a conference, and it's gonna potentially bill $500,000 to me as the client, right? The letter of intent phase is designed merely so that you can framework a floor plan, stage designs, specific strategies, specific to my thing, but I can't pay you yet. Or if I'm bidding out 3 companies. However, an LOI ensures that Mahogany gets paid at least $5,000 against the opportunity. And that way, I can fairly buy all her creative off of her. And if I want to take her designs and use them, or her strategies and use them in perpetuity, those are mine. I bought them for $5,000. If I sign the contract with Mahogany for $500,000, the $5,000 merely acts as our first payment with Mahogany, because that's what it is, right? So we're not actually billing for it. I mean, you can bill for your design services, creative services, production, ideation, creative planning, whatever you want to bill it out later. And $5,000 is just the first deposit, just a deposit. And a lot of times we'll put a longer window of collection. We won't collect it up front, but we'll say, once you sign this, we'll immediately start working on it, and you owe us the money in 30 days, basically. And that way, you get to bill them for it. So if they want to kick the tires on it, especially right now, I've got a lot of tire kickers that are coming around going like, hey, we're floating this idea for this. It's going to be in fall, but it could move to spring of next year. Yep. By getting an LOI that has lower risk and a lower dollar amount tied to it, you can encourage your clients to continue to work with you and continue to plan with you at a nominal fee that they can then apply to the larger scope of work. So that even if I want to push it into a different taxable year, Mahogany's been paid $5,000 of her $495,000. And when I, fire it up again with Mahogany in, February of next year to bring that opportunity back to life, we've already engaged to a certain degree. And at least I can take all of Mahogany's ideas and her designs, put them on ice for a little bit while the executives talk about it for a while and while COVID does its thing. And we're able to pick up that work, but at least we've been doing work. You haven't just stopped. Because my issue when I talk to clients right now, and Mahogany, I want your opinion about this too, is everyone's just like, stop everything. And that's incredibly detrimental to all of our businesses, right? So getting in to start that process now is incredibly important. So I would encourage you guys to start using LOIs as a basis for continuing ideation and planning with your clients with a little bit less risk threshold, so your clients aren't as scared to keep it going. Mahogany, do you have any feelings about that?
I completely agree. And that's actually something that, to be fair, overlooked for many, many years. I felt like, Della and I've also had this conversation too, in that we are often called to outline a potential strategy. And I've been burned once on this, that I've never put it into the contract, but 16 years ago. And I literally had put in a proposal for an event, and the company who actually won the bid called me. And I thought, how'd you see my proposal? And they said, because the client hired them because they were, I was 24. So to be fair, so they hired the other company and said they liked my execution and strategy and ideas better. You need to execute this plan. So they literally handed over my plan.
Yep, and I have been there myself, and I think that everybody has been there in some scale or capacity. We've been there, and part of these Q&As that we like to have are about a little bit more story time, so we can talk about our experience in doing that. And I'll tell you guys, I've walked into my trade show booth that I designed on CES show floor, and it was very awkward. And I actually, because I was upset, I opened up the storage room. I knew where the door was, so I designed it there. And I opened it up, and there's the CEO, CMO, and CTO. And I said, guys, what's up? And they, the look on their face was incredible, because they didn't pay me for any of that creative, but it wasn't worth the lawsuit. I just basically, it was a little bit of a subtle middle finger up, but I never heard from them ever again. And I certainly didn't follow up with them ever again. So they are now out of business. And they're actually wanted by the SEC for fraud. So go me for that client intuition. Separately, there's a very large broadcast client. This example is only like about 10 months old. Very large broadcast client that will go unnamed, but top 5 in the world. Got 3 bids for a trade show booth. And a friend of mine actually was the high bidder of 3. He didn't know that, of course. But then they used his design, and they had the low bidder designed it, just like you were saying, Mahogany. Yeah. And he was able to use his relationship with the client, and he said, look, guys, like, this is one-to-one. It's our creative. We don't want to do anything legal because we like our relationship. So what's up? And they actually offered him $25,000 to pay for the design. They said, look, we totally get it. Like, you're 100% right. Sorry we let that even happen. Like, that was unfair. And they made him whole because of the relationship. And Mahogany and I both understand that all of these, Eventpreneur series and most of our lessons here all come back to a relationship that you have to forge with that client. And that's something we can't teach. You just can't. But try to get that relationship forged and have conversations. And one thing that I would advise you to consider, and I always use this whenever things go sour in anything, I always say everything is a conversation until one party or both parties stop talking. It's all conversation until that happens. And in some legal respects, it's always a conversation until you hire an attorney, because there might be legal reasons why you can no longer be speaking freely and directly at that point. So, again, mediation is always better than court, no matter what country or no matter what attorney you might have. I don't think any attorney would argue with me that that's not advisable. So talk to people, guys. Like, it's a way less awkward talk to have a conversation with them that sucks than it is to get served or serve somebody else. So
absolutely.
There's that.
I love that. And it looks like our audience is also loving that, giving us the hearts on that one.
Good.
Conversations first.
Which I honestly hope that those hearts are because you haven't had that experience. I hope that some of these conversations and why we do case studies for you guys is because they're much cheaper lessons to learn through me than they are to do yourself. In fact, if you're at a large organization wanting to start your own practice, I would advise that you take this portion to tune in to conversations that don't involve you, because when you start your own business, it all involves you. The rent, the utilities, the jerk on the corner, the creepy guy outside, all those weird little things that you just ignore because somebody else will deal with will soon become your problem. And all of a sudden you going, that's what Carol's always yelling about, is going to be what you will be yelling about pretty soon. So that's the purpose of this too. So please ask questions away. I know I don't see a lot of content, but I'm glad you guys are receiving it well. So that's great. One of the biggest things too is when to walk away. One of the best pieces of business advice that I ever got was that, I don't want to misquote this, but the only better talent than knowing when a good deal is on the front end is knowing when to walk away from a bad deal. Right? And a lot of times, because you all get emotional, I get emotional about my business, you make clouded judgment decisions because you're like, I got so much invested in this client. And I did that with that client that I walked into their trade show booth. And I'm just going to tell you the clients, XI3 computers, they're horrible people. And I walked in the trade show booth that they stole. And it always felt weird. I spent all this money. I was so broke. I spent $14,000 of hard costs flying to Vegas, then flying to Scottsdale. Then I flew to their home office in Utah twice. And then we went to Vegas again just to walk in our own trade show booth. 19 proposals, never gave me a penny. And I should have known then. But that's a lesson here, is knowing when to walk away is when anybody on the client side, or sorry, on the I forgot what we're talking about, on the partner side, the partner vendor side, anytime they do anything that just smells a little off, from a moral, ethical judgment standpoint, do not accept an excuse from them. You run. Don't walk away. Just run. Just be like, you know what? I don't think that the synergy is there. But leave on good terms, because it could still amount to something in the future. Bring you some piece of business, and they kind of learn the error of their ways. But it doesn't mean that you have to refer them to work. If they do something that feels distrusting, dishonest, the street word to be shady, anything that feels shady, don't take their excuse as like, well, maybe his mom did die. It's like, I know that something's bad that happens, but like, no, you gotta show up, and there are real excuses that are really bad, but don't accept patterned BS, because it's probably just BS. So run away before you have too much to lose.
And put it to bed. Put it to bed without any worries about it too.
You got to. And on that note too, and going back to my earlier point, don't burn bridges in our industry. It's a very small industry. You know, Mahogany and I almost couldn't be further apart from each other geographically in North America. We are very far apart. And yet she and I have had dinner in more foreign cities because we're at the same stuff. Really, right? I mean, like, how did we meet? I think we did meet in Texas. I mean, why Texas? You and I, why were we there? I don't even know. We've met abroad, but
was it even Texas?
I don't know. But we met somewhere foreign and weird, and we got along. And it's a very small industry. And there are people that I hate that no one knows that I hate because I have no respect for how we've engaged or what I've seen them do out there, and they would never know it because it's just more important that we just, you know, you maintain distance, but you can still engage professionally at functions. So don't do legal contact because, you know, basically legal proceedings, contact from a lawyer is lighter fluid, and legal proceedings are fire, you know? So just be really careful with that, you know, and just talk to people, right? So, I mean, Mahogany, on that note, we acknowledge that partnership is essential. Partnership are the training wheels for you guys to see how to expand your business. If every month you're partnering with another planner, maybe it's time that you consider a joint venture with that planner. Maybe it's time that you consider hiring more people on your staff. But at least the beta version is trying out vendors, seeing where there's synergies, seeing where you can make money. Like maybe you're just really jiving with somebody else. In fact, I actually have a trade show buddy that we're actually competitors. He actually is in Texas, not to keep bringing up Texas, I don't know why. But whenever Casey and I are together, first of all, it's a train wreck. And but regardless of that, when we walk a show floor together, we actually meet people better because if they're more in his region or more of his skill set, we kind of lean the conversation towards him. And likewise for me, he leans conversation towards me because our specialties within the same industry are slightly different. Our approaches, our personalities are different. And if you can connect with one person and I connect with another person, it's kind of like if you're the wingman on a date. And that's very much what networking is, right? I mean, wingman for your buddies, right? If you have an AV partner who is extremely talented but not well-spoken, maybe if you guys market yourself together, you can find business in his clients or her clients, and they can find business in your clients, right? You can cross-pollinate or overlap those circles of influence to where you're doubling or tripling the amount of access that you have to potential new clients. And that's more of a biz dev conversation, but all of this is related because the package deal, the whole shebang, is why people choose you versus somebody else. And it's what's going to grow your business and make you a strong contender. Mahogany, we're about 10 minutes early, but let's get your kind of final thoughts here. But before your final thoughts, please ask some questions, guys, if you want to engage with it. But Mahogany, what are your wrapping statements on the subject matter?
I have to completely agree. I mean, for me, I know when I was starting, there was a lot of conversations that you really should never take a partner. You should never have a partner in your business, all of these things. However, for me personally, what I find to be helpful for growing my own business is I don't want to take on multitude of staff and things like that.
Sure.
I want to control what I have. So I have found partners to be able to hire people with more experience, diverse experience, and partner and work on things that I would not have had I not partnered with them. And then it also keeps my own integrity. It also allows me to continue to choose the products and the events I want to work on. And it also allows me to choose who I work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've been able to work with some great minds in this industry by doing that. So,
especially from a boots in the ground standpoint, which is kind of what we rubber meets the road type thing. I got a call from a client earlier today, and it's a firm that's based in Paris, and he knows that I have no interest in poaching his clients, and he wants us to do the New York and the Los Angeles activations of this simultaneous event that we're going to have. It's a super luxury event that we're going to simulcast. In fact, I'm excited to share it with all of you guys because it's a hybrid event in itself in the luxury field. We're doing an event in China, in South Asia, in Australia, in London, Berlin, Paris. The list goes on, right? But we're going to hit all the American markets because we can. So having that strategic ability, like if I'm doing something in Toronto or Montreal, I'm not going to go up there. I don't even know all the compliance things that are going to happen when I go up there. But when my client that's local to my market and local to my relationship talks to me about it, I'm going to call Mahogany up and I'm going to say, girl, I don't know what I'm doing. I need your help. And I have no interest in you facing the client, but I need your logistical help. And I'm going to put you on board for whatever your fees are going to be. And Mahogany, we're going to kill it. We're going to make some money together and everyone's happy. It's totally good. It's totally copacetic.
Yeah. Stephanie is also enjoying the comments, and she says, what an impact. And she said, awesome insight. So we thank you for your engagement as well, Stephanie, and for always being part of the club and showing up to all of our events and being supportive and vocal in the community.
Definitely. Well, Mahogany, thank you. I think we can wrap up on that note if you want to give us a wrapping summary here. But thank you all for letting me join you again. And again, I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Mahogany?
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us again. Look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday for the next episode of The Creative Commerce. Don't forget to join the chat in the Eventpreneur Club. We look forward to having you. And for all of you who have an extra email this week, the journey begins June 1st for the next event. Bye.